Welcome to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. And whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 109th episode of the SImple Sophisticate. Today, we are going into the kitchen and we are going to get ourselves ready to cook whatever we want. So we have a fantastic time every time we go into that kitchen. And what we're going to do is talk about how to have it stocked and ready to go. Before I get into that list that you will most definitely recognize as things that you probably already have, and maybe just a few items that you need to add, let me give you a hint as to what today's Petit Plaisir is. It is a recipe that I have been working on this spring with some fantastic ingredients that I cannot wait to share with you. And some of you have already told me you love these ingredients and you just can't imagine not using this particular ingredient when that is listed on a recipe. But it is a simple recipe that enlivens an everyday protein. And so stay tuned. I think you will love it. If you like chicken, this is a great way to add even more flavor and impress whoever you're serving, whether it's guests, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's you. You're going to not be out a bunch of money and you're going to be absolutely satiated because the flavor is magnificent. Well, that will occur at the end of today's episode, but let's get back to today's topic for this episode. I'm going to share with you today 34 must-have items for your home épicerie. An épicerie is your pantry, it's your refrigerator, it's your freezer, it's what you have around your stovetop. It is the food you will always want to have on hand. It's not something that you're going to have to go get every single week, every single day, like going to the market, getting your fresh fruit and vegetables. That's not what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about those staple items, but we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible because we can have a ton of stuff in our cupboards and never use it. These are the items. After I went through my own kitchen, after I read a couple of different books and basically said, yeah, no, yes, absolutely cannot live without. When I don't have that, I feel like I have been not crippled, but I've been limited. And it's usually something very simple, but it has a lot of power and improves the quality of so many different dishes. So that is what we're going to talk about today. And I want to start with a quote from Julia Child in the book, My Life in France. It is a lengthy one, so sit back, enjoy it. And I have a feeling you're going to recognize some of the stuff she shares if you haven't already read this quote. Here we go. In Paris in the 1950s, I had the supreme good fortune to study with a remarkably able group of chefs. From them, I learned why good French food is an art and why it makes such sublime eating. Nothing is too much trouble if it turns out the way it should. Good results require that one take time and care. And if one doesn't use the freshest ingredients or read the whole recipe before starting, and if one rushes through the cooking, the result will be an inferior taste and texture, a gummy beef Wellington, say. But a careful approach will result in a magnificent burst of flavor, a thoroughly satisfying meal, perhaps even a life-changing experience. Such was the case with sole meunière I ate at La Couronne on my first day in France in November 1948. It was an epiphany. In all the years since the succulent meal, I have yet to lose the feelings of wonder and excitement that it inspired in me. I can still almost taste it, and thinking back on it now reminds me that the pleasures of table and of life are infinite. Toujours bon appétit. Julia Child, from her book, My Life in France. Time spent in the kitchen can be a truly magical experience. I must admit, the only time I look at the clock when I'm in the kitchen is if I am timing food on the stovetop or in the oven. And even then, I'm not really looking at it for the time, but rather to see how much time has passed. Cooking enables us to be present, or forces us to be present, which is a very good thing if we aren't doing enough of that in our lives. It enables us to immerse ourselves in making food that serves as a form of expression towards those we are serving. And the more time we spend in the kitchen and the more learned we become in the techniques, the more significant the outcomes can be. And don't get me wrong, just as in life, so long as we are choosing to grow, learn, and attempt new things, we will have those cringe-worthy moments. But as someone who has been tinkering and exploring in the kitchen since I was a young girl, the outcomes become more and more successful, and along with them, more and more enjoyable. I chose Julia Child's quote today because while yes, it is this scene in the movie that introduces viewers to Meryl Streep as Julia Child and Nora Ephron's film that was one of my favorites, Julie and Julia, she makes some very powerful observations that often are forgotten along the attempts for success in the kitchen. Fresh ingredients, read the entire recipe before beginning, and enjoy the process. Do not rush. As my aunt, who is a caterer, reminds, if you cook with love, your food will be filled with love. In other words, offer exquisite flavor. Now, granted, one must know what they are doing, but enjoy the process. Don't rush the chopping of the vegetables, sautéing of the garlic and the shallots, and the resting of the protein. Such as in life, so too is it in the kitchen. Gather the necessary ingredients and tools. Come with as much knowledge as you can, always being willing to learn more, and dive into the present. Today, I'd like to help you gather the bare essentials when it comes to the necessary ingredients to be successful in the kitchen, no matter how often you step into this magical space in the home. There is something, as I said, when you're in the kitchen, you're very present. You can lose track of time. It can be a fantastic opportunity to just step out of whatever worries and stresses you may have and dive in. But this is the thing, and this is why I wanted to share today's episode. When you're in a groove and you're cooking and you're reaching for the ingredients and the tools that you need, when you find that you're missing an ingredient or two, and you know you need it, it totally kills the flow and the vibe. It's like you're almost kicked out of the mood, you know? It's like when someone says something very off-putting after you're having this fantastic conversation and they say something that just completely makes you cringe. You stop in your tracks and you get out of that zone. Maybe you even have to go to the grocery store to go get it. Or maybe you stop altogether. That's what we're going to try to eliminate today. We're going to try to make sure that you can keep that flow, that vibe in the kitchen when you step in so that you are prepared for whatever recipe or whatever tweak you want to make. As far as the tools are concerned, I have broken down the necessary tools for a baker's kitchen as well as a cook's kitchen, and I've put them in their own separate posts, and I'll provide a link to those in today's show notes. And as I mentioned at the top of today's episode, after I read a handful of cookbooks and compiled lists by trusted cooks such as Susan Herman Lomas, Patricia Wells, and Holly Peterson, and then perused their suggestions, then compared it to what I use on a regular basis, without a second thought, I made the list that I am sharing with you today. I absolutely recommend it and live by it when I step into the kitchen. Granted, I'm always growing and learning, so maybe in a few years' time I'll tweak it. But this is after a lot of tweaking and using it already, and it works fantastically. 34 items, that's it. And a few of them are actually tools because I did not include these tools in my other list. And I think for whether you're a cook or a baker, these are just the everyday tools you're going to want to have handy. All of the food items below are for those for the pantry, on the counter, as I said, in the refrigerator, in the freezer, that you're always going to want to have at the ready. I am not going to include the weekly shopping items that you pick up or the daily items you pick up at the market, the vegetables, the fruit, the fresh caught fish, those kind of things that are the seasonal items that you're going to want to get. So let's get started. Number one are herbs. Grown in your garden during the warmer months or in pots placed near a window, there are, as you know, a myriad of herbs to plant. So have fun choosing which ones you want. The few that I use repeatedly are basil, Italian parsley, rosemary, oregano, and chives. But I have a lot more in my garden. I have fun learning about new herbs as well and trying them in new dishes. But those are the 5 that I absolutely recommend to get you started with. And I'll provide a link to a blog post that I wrote a few years ago about building that herb garden. And it doesn't have to be large. Like I said, it can be a small little place of soil. It can be put in pots outside on your deck or small little pots inside. So number 1 is herbs. Number 2, and again, I did not have this in my regular tools. We're going to need this for anything when you're in the kitchen, is to have a cutting board. And I recommend having at least 2. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, it was brought to my attention that having more than one cutting board is a very good idea. One for nearly everything, and the other, perhaps a little smaller, for the items that bring with them a lovely but strong scent, such as garlic and onions. I found a Booz 24 by 18 maple cutting board at a yard sale years ago, and I snatched it up for just $10. But these boards, you see them on Food Network shows, you see them, they're pretty common, but they are quality boards and they are worth having. But any kind of cutting board that works well for you that you love, make sure you have 1 and perhaps 2 as well. Number 3. You're going to want to have 2 types of salt at a minimum. There are so many other salts out there, but at least have 2. Have kosher salt for when you're mixing things and you're flavoring the chicken or you're flavoring the meat, whatever, before you actually start cooking it. And then also have a finishing salt, such as fleur de sel. Kosher salt, as we said, is for cooking, and the finishing salts are just that. They are for sprinkling on top of your dishes after they're done when you're finished, and that adds an extra pop of flavor. So number 3 is have 2 types of salt at a minimum. Number 4, have a pepper meal. One tool I did not have for quite some time was a pepper meal. I never really realized when I was younger that it was a good idea to have these. I didn't understand the purpose besides just showing off at a restaurant. I mean, as a kid, you just don't know. And there is a reason you want a pepper meal and not just to have pepper already grinded up waiting for you to use. It has, again, to do with the flavor. And it allows the oils to become readily present as soon as those peppercorns are grinded up. It can be a beautiful piece to have next to your countertop. I am loving and using every single day Piaget. And I'll provide a link to that on today's show notes. They're wooden, they're the classic looking ones, but they have between 6 to 8 different sizes of shavings or grindings of the peppercorn based on what you need or want. It's fantastic. Number 5 is to have an olive oil dispenser. There is never a day I do not use extra virgin olive oil. So having it next to my stove in a beautiful dispenser is a must. I absolutely love Chef's Planet's glass dispensers. They're simple, small. They're not the stock ones you see that everyone seems to have. Pure glass. No black, no metal. They're beautiful. I'll provide a link to those on today's show notes. Number 6 is to have balsamic vinegar at the ready, next to your countertop, somewhere where you can easily find it and grab it. Never a salad dressing was made without some type of vinegar, and my favorite is balsamic. Always choosing a quality balsamic that has more viscosity than most vinegars, although you can always reduce it down over low heat. You can also use balsamic for finishing a favorite appetizer. I recently shared a picture of a recipe that I drizzled with balsamic vinegar, which was my caprese bruschetta recipe. I'll provide a link to that recipe on today's show notes. But it's also great for putting over a vegetable dish. I love putting it over roasted Brussels sprouts with pancetta. So simple, absolutely delicious, and it just amplifies the flavor, and it's a good mixture of differing components. So number 6 is have balsamic vinegar. Number 7 are to have ceramic utensil holders, or just one. Having all your cooking tools within arm's reach is a must for a seamless experience in the kitchen. I have included on today's show notes a few of the basics that I use regularly, pictures and everything, links to them, the ones that I use. But the list is simply spatula. You're going to want a metal as well as a rubber spatula, wooden spoons, zester, tongs, spider strainer, and there's a picture of that on the blog so you can check it out, a fish spatula, and I also like to go back to the spatulas. I like having a lot of wooden spatulas, as well as, for my bakers out there, a French rolling pin. Again, all of those are on today's show notes. So number 7 is to have a ceramic utensil holder that holds all of your cooking utensils. Maybe 2. I divide mine up with metal in one and wood in another. My mom has 3, and she puts them with types of utensils like spatulas in this one and metal in this one. And then however it's going to easily be divided so you can find them, and it's also easy to organize them when you put them away. Moving on to number 8. Number 8 is a simple tea kettle. La Creuset is my go-to to begin the day, to end the day, and everything in between. From boiling water for my morning steel oats breakfast to unwinding at the end of the day with a dark chocolate peanut butter truffle. A tea kettle is a must, and it looks great on your stove. So invest because they can be around for years and years and years. All right, number 9 through 11 are quick and simple. Just always have them at the ready. 9 is garlic, 10 shallots, and 11 lemon. All 3 of those. Lemon I use every single day. I have it with my hot water in the morning, plus in the evening if I'm making dinner. A lot of the recipes that I use either call for zest or a spritz of lemon. Shallots are just a lovely, soft, muted onion flavor that get a lot of different sauces and a lot of different dishes started. And then garlic, as you know, goes in so many different dishes as well. Always have those at the ready. Number 12 is butter. De beurre. All right. Unsalted and salted, have them both on hand. I have recently started to use Plugra's European style butter, but I will also include a link to 30 great butters that are recommended by the cooking magazine Savour. And I think you'll be amazed. So many more regular go-to grocery stores such as Safeways and Albertsons have these high-quality butters that aren't that expensive. I don't want you to think, oh, no, so they're really not. I bought a cup of Plugra unsalted butter the other day for $3.49. All right, so it's not uber expensive. And as one of my friends who bakes a lot says, when it goes on sale, I stock up on it. It's worth it. You'll notice a difference. You absolutely will notice a difference. Number 13, cheese. Good cheese. Have on hand Parmigiano Reggiano, as well as a soft cheese of your choice, a hard cheese, and if you like, a blue cheese. Now, I sometimes don't always have a blue cheese or a hard or a soft. I usually have at least one, either a soft or a hard, but I always have Parmigiano Reggiano on hand. Absolutely always. And don't just get Parmesan. Get the real deal, even if it's a small chunk. There is a difference in flavor. It's a pepperier, can't speak, and you will notice a change in the flavor. So number 13 is to have cheese, good cheese. Number 14 is to have heavy cream on hand, or whole milk or milk, whatever you usually cook with. 15 is to have steel oats or your breakfast cereals, whatever your breakfast cereals are. 16 is to have mustard. I'm going to go into more depth about the whole mustard thing in today's Petit Plaisir, but have mustard on hand that's quality, because most of your recipes, if you make your own vinaigrette, will require or ask for a mustard, a Dijon mustard mostly. My go-to is Maille. Maille, Maille, is my absolute now favorite. I did not know about this mustard, and it's been around since the 18th century. Shannon, where have you been? As soon as I tried it, I noticed a significant difference in the quality of the flavor. Much more depth, no bitter, no tart. It wasn't, shocking. It was subtle. It was silky. It was delicious. So you can either get their classic Dijon or whole grain or honey Dijon. I just saw that they also now have a rosemary Dijon. Oh, that will be delicious. All right. But stay tuned for today's Petit Plaisir, and I'll walk you through how to use mustard in a dish other than just a vinaigrette. Number 17 is to have potatoes on hand, whether fingerlings or your favorite type of potato, have that on hand for a good starch inside from time to time. 18, always be stocked up on your tea and coffee. My favorite is Monton Bleu from Palais d'été, and I order that online about every month or every 2 months, and I just stock up, order their recyclable sacks and put it in the tin that I purchased on my first time ever buying their teas. And I'm always content with my cup of tea in the morning or in the evening. I also do like green tea. And there's so many different, as you know, flavors and companies, but having your favorite coffee or tea on hand is always that good start or end to the day. 19, have lentils. Depending on how you use your lentils, there are all sorts of different types. I have a few recipes that I use lentils with to pair with my salmon and all sorts of other things. But having those on hand is a great thing to have in the pantry. Number 20, for baking, if you're a baker, you want flour, you want sugar, white and brown sugar, as well as yeast. Those again are the basics. If you're a serious baker, you obviously probably have a lot more ingredients that you're going to include. Number 21, honey. Always have honey on hand, not only for breakfast cereals, but it's a great natural sweetener to all sorts of dishes. 22, eggs. 23, semi-sweet or dark chocolate with a minimum of 70% cacao. Whether you're making hot chocolate or you're a baker for a ganache, having this on hand and having it to be making sure it's quality will make a wonderful difference in the flavor of your desserts. And number 24, pasta. Your favorite type of pasta that you usually use. 25, canned tomato sauce. And number 26, chutney. I recently have been enjoying a mango chutney and using it with my shrimp. And oh my goodness, it is absolutely delightful. I have only touched the surface of truly appreciating what can be done with chutney. I've seen it around a lot. I just didn't really understand it or know what to do with it, but I am loving the savory quality that it offers. And it is, as you probably already know, if you use chutney, it's like a jam, but it's a savory jam. And there are so many different flavors out there that you can use. So good. So good. You can even pair with cheeses. I've done that before too. That's delicious. Anyway, so 26 is having a chutney on hand. 27 is having top quality mayonnaise. 28, in your freezer, have some kind of frozen seafood if you like seafood. My favorite is have shrimp on hand because I can mix it with so many different other things. Have your favorite meat on hand, chicken, sausage, beef, whatever, as well as extra unsalted butter. So we talked about when it goes on sale, stock up. Ice cream or gelato, because you got to pair your tarts and your pies, and sometimes you just need ice cream. But my favorite is gelato. I make sure I always have a vanilla on hand and a dark chocolate or chocolate for my guests. I typically don't eat chocolate ice cream, not because I don't like it, but I just don't use it. I don't eat it that often, but my guests typically like to have the choice. So 28 is make sure you have that food in your freezer. 29, any other additional oils and vinegars that you use for your vinaigrettes and other common recipes, make sure you have those in your cupboards. Number 30, spices. Again, you're going to know the recipes you like to cook, but make sure you have the spices on hand that you use most often. Number 31, sliced and toasted almonds. Now, not everyone will need them already to be toasted. I do because I sprinkle them on my breakfast every single morning, and I'm not going to toast my almonds every single morning. You can get them toasted or untoasted, sliced or not sliced, but I like having almonds on hand. 32, raisins, snacking, breakfast, all sorts of different things you can do there. And 33 is jam. I mean, come on. For croissants on the weekend, bien sûr. If you can get your hands on homemade jam, that is obviously the absolute best. Or if you make your own homemade jam, but otherwise, having some jam on hand to put on a warm croissant with a hot cup of tea, my type of simple luxury. And the last one I could go into ad nauseum, but I always have some wine on hand. I always have a white and a red that I love. As well, make sure you buy what you like to drink, because if your recipe calls for some kind of Chardonnay or dry wine, you're going to want to put a wine on your meal that you would also want to drink. Now, you don't want to pour the most expensive bottle of wine into that particular dish, but you still want to make sure it tastes delicious. So have those on hand. And then any other wine you come across that you taste and you bring home because it's delicious. I think my big thing is I only have about 7 bottles of wine at any given time. I don't have a huge wine, pantry stocked up. But my big thing is I want to know that the wine I have is good. So I really do appreciate tastings. I don't have as many opportunities to taste wine since I don't live next to Walla Walla anymore. But there's something about that peace of mind of knowing that you are serving good wine if it's not just you that's enjoying that glass. Now, if you aren't able to taste everything, I highly recommend going to a wine shop where you trust the worker in that particular wine shop. I have one here that I absolutely trust. They've never led me astray. And so it's one of those things where you just have to find the shop that is your go-to, and then just keep returning. All right, so number 34 is wine. And it's a good one to end on, no? All right. I know you're thinking 34, that's a lot, Shannon, for my home épicerie. Yes and no. While the list may seem long, once you have all of these items stocked, it will take some time for many of them to run out, and only a handful will you be restocking weekly or biweekly. For me, that would be the lemons, the eggs, and sometimes the butter. The oils and the flour, and there's so many others on this list, so many more, most of them on the list, that you're not going to run out of for months. Knowing that you have everything on hand for the basics of everyday cooking and baking will make it all the more enjoyable to step into the kitchen and get lost in the moment. Recently, Giada De Laurentiis shared in an interview that we must, quote, create a space in our kitchens that we enjoy being in. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's a simple concept, but she's so absolutely correct. As I mentioned in a previous podcast, allow your kitchen to be your sous chef. Organize it in such a way that it is easy to navigate. The necessary supplies are readily available. Clutter is kept to a minimum in your cupboards, and the counters are as clear as possible. When your space is inviting, when you have beautiful and highly functional tools to use, keep those knives sharpened, you will want to step into the space and work your magic. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I will have this entire list on the show notes, and you can find that on the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 109. You can print it out, whatever you want to do, and make sure that you are ready to go. Now, before I get to today's Petit Plaisir, I want to send out a huge thank you to one of my favorite French blogs, or Francophile blogs, called Hip Paris. I have been following them since I started blogging. They always have great profiles on places to go, things to do in Paris, and they have a handful of different contributors. And one of their contributors this past weekend, Erin Dahl, wrote a post titled Paris Podcasts, the Best French Fixes. And I just want to give her a huge thank you because she included the SImple Sophisticate in this list. Granted, I do not live in France, but as you all know, there are many undertones of French and the culture that I love. Quality over quantity, appreciation for classic, iconic things that are not only beautiful, but functional as well. And I've provided a link to that post on today's show notes so you can take a look at the list because there are some others that I know you're going to enjoy if you are a Francophile. All right, let's get to the Petit Plaisir. I'll see you in just a few. All right, so this week's Petit Plaisir is a recipe simply called 3 mustard chicken. And there are a ton of recipes out there for 3 mustard chicken, but I wanted to fine tune it, make it my own, but also simplify it, ensuring there's absolute quality ingredients that we can make in the middle of the work week as well as in the weekend and still impress our guests and impress our own palate. As you know, chicken is probably one of the more go-to proteins. It is for me and my everyday choices. So it's fun to try to mix it up with varying flavors. And the good news, that's easy to do. As you remember, a few months ago, I read Susan Herman Lomas's book, In a French Kitchen, and I learned of Maille mustards. She highly recommends them, by the way. And I was starting to think, why have I not been using this? Where can I find it at? Has this company been around a long time? Well, yes, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, it has. In fact, it's been around since 1747. Again, I'm late to the party, but now I am fully and unabashedly on board, and I highly recommend it. As someone who loves her spinach salad with a classic vinaigrette dressing, and I'll provide a link to that recipe on today's show notes, when I made the change from the generic brands of Dijon mustard to Maille, the recognizable difference in the flavor was immediate. It has a depth of flavor that, as I mentioned, is not tart or bitter. There's a silky, smooth finishing touch, and the quality that completes the dish will prompt your guests to ask, what is in this? From their classic Dijon to their whole mustard and honey mustard, each version is a delight to cook with, and now my kitchen is fully stocked with them. After I was introduced by Susan Herman Lomas to this brand, it was purely coincidental, but I just happened to tune into one of my favorite podcasts, my food podcasts, Bon Appetit, and they started talking about 3 mustard chicken. I'm walking along on my hike with the dogs, and I'm thinking, that sounds simple, pretty basic. I can do this. I figured the universe was trying to subtly nudge me to try something. And so I tried it, and I'm really glad I did. I've done it a few times and made some tweaks along the way, but because there's so many, like I said, so many recipes out there that have their own version of it. I looked at Barefoot Contessa's, I looked at Jamie Oliver's, I looked at a bunch of food bloggers that I trust, and I'm thinking, well, that list of ingredients is 5,000 miles long, and I'm sure it's delicious, but I don't have all those, and I want to be able to make this during the everyday week, right? So while there's some special, occasion recipes out there, I tried to come up with one that was simple, limited the ingredients, but ensured that the quality of ingredients were top-notch so that the flavor was absolutely delicious. And so I have the recipe to share with you today. It takes only 45 minutes from prepping to cook time to get this done and enjoy it. It will make about 4 servings, depending on the size of the chicken thighs that you use. And you can either use bone-in or not. In the recipe with the pictures on today's episode, I used ones without the bone, and they were so good. I know that having the bone in brings a lot more flavor, so you can do either one. I do highly recommend you use male mustard products, but you can clearly use any mustard that you like. And again, the recipe is so simple. You can find it on the show notes, the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast109. And again, we talked about having an herb garden. Rosemary comes into play in this recipe and adds that additional flavor as well. Honey comes into play in this recipe. Olive oil, chicken stock. Most of the items on this list are simply going to be in your épicerie at your home. You're going to be ready to go no matter what the week or how the week is going for you. You're going to have that on hand. So it complements nicely what we've been talking about this entire episode. Again, find the recipe on the show notes, the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast109. And bon appetit, as Julia Child says. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast where I'll recommend a book, a film, or in this case, a recipe. Anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Thank you for tuning in to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. To stay caught up on the most recent podcast, blog post, and receive exclusive news, as well as an extra dose of inspiration each week, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or your morning coffee, just in time to jumpstart the weekend. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bon journée.